Good morning, everyone. Welcome to the regular meeting of the Finance Committee for ReGen Monterey. It's October 1st, and we're coming up on 9 o'clock. So, roll call, please, Ida.
Director Delgado,
Here.
Vice Chair Blackwelder, Chair Sherman,
Here.
we have a quorum.
Great, thanks. We'll open it up for public comments. Any, want to make public comments on anything not on the agenda? I don't know if we have anyone online.
Should not.
No, okay. Those public comments, we'll move on to discussion. 4A, which is to approve the Finance Committee meeting minutes for July 2nd.
I move approval.
Right, I will second. So I guess those in favor? Aye. Were there any public comments on these? Any?
No, I showed them online.
No, okay, great, thanks. We'll move on to discuss the landfill gas utilization study.
Morning, I'm fine with it. At this time, we're gonna have Director Ramirez introduce the item. This item is an item of interest for us on short-term and long-term visibility around our landfill gas usage. Traditionally, since 1983, 84, ReGen has produced power through a cogeneration plant. And at this time, we're making evaluations and looking to, in the near future, come with some recommendations for the board to evaluate. This is our first attempt to give you a little preview of where the draft's at, what staff is looking at. Hopefully start some of the protons and the thinking around the facilitated direction that we're going in. It could be in gas, it could be in power, it could be a hybrid version of it. This is our second consultant that has put, same consultant, second review of the gas utilization study. The first one was attempted to run laterally with Monterey One Water to see if we could develop a gas infrastructure for both entities. Because Monterey One Water was running at a more rapid pace to use their 300 to 500 SCFM, which is probably a fourth of what we generate. They were gonna use a smaller infrastructure so that you can start developing, running a linear generator on site. So they, at some time in the future, we could expect Monterey One Water to wanna generate the entirety of their power need as they continue to build their infrastructure moving forward. So similar to ReGen's position now is we fulfill all our power need. They would wanna be in that same area in the future, and they're looking at different methods to do so. At this time, we're making all the evaluations. We are looking at other facets that need to be evaluated before we render a decision and some recommendations to the board. We feel November, December, we could be closer to rendering some positions that we would want more feedback and potentially an opportunity to evaluate even deeper into the finances, the market, and even deeper than what we have gone with this secondary evaluation of our gas utilization. So a little bit of background on it. This time I hand it over to David, and we did have conversations of how we wanted to layer this out. So we're gonna start with the interpretation that we got from the landfill gas utilization.
Before we go to David, if it's not the right time to answer my question, maybe I can get the answer later. But hearing you introduce this makes me think that it would be good to know what our anticipated total power supply is and what our anticipated total power supply need is, and what M1 Water's total power supply need is. So supply and demand, basically, it would be nice to get those overall figures.
I think we can answer that question pretty openly now, based on the infrastructure that we have, but I mean, do you wanna come back to this one later? I mean.
Yeah, and it's a lot of this information is contained in the study itself. So both how much gas we would need to produce our own power, how much gas we would need to supply the power that M1W has been requesting from us. So a lot of these nitty-gritty details are gonna be in the report itself.
Are they in the first study?
They are kind of an overview. Yes, they are in the study. This is more focused on ReGen. Those numbers were kind of pretty vague about what each entity was gonna need, because now we're talking about a strategy of like how much power, how much gas do we want to use. And do we want to continue doing power, et cetera? So this is kind of the questions that come up.
So we'll get to the supply and demand at a future date. How's that sound?
I'll get started and we're very, very early and I'll go over this in the presentation. I put together a quick PowerPoint just to help start the conversation because it's extremely complicated. It's been really challenging to balance all the different options that we have to consider. And I usually do landfill 101, but this is landfill 301 because it's an advanced discussion. And we've moved up, exactly. So all your previous training is gonna come into play on this topic. So once again, here's a picture of what is happening. You know, the trash creates methane. We collect that methane in wells. Currently, we're sending some of that gas to the landfill flare, which just burns it off as waste heat. And some of that gas goes to electrical generation, which is used for on-site power and for to be sent to the PG&E grid. This is kind of the current scenario and just a cartoon of how the system works. And as we start to talk about this, and I'm emphasizing start because it's going to be a long road ahead to completely dive into one of the solutions. This is kind of a project. This is a project timeline. We have initiation, planning, execution, monitoring, closure in a whole project. We are here. So just remember that we're initiating kind of a study. We're initiating an overall look. There's not a decision that we're gonna have to make today. There's not a decision we're gonna have to make at the next board meeting. This is information gathering time to create project, to create the planning that we're gonna be doing. And you know, that planning could take 1 to 2 years to develop a project, to develop the infrastructure that we need to install to fully realize this strategy. The execution itself, constructing, permitting, et cetera, could be 1 to 3 years, depending on what we select. If we choose power, it's going to be a lot easier because we already have some of the infrastructure that we would need. If we start to move towards an RNG option, we're going to have to coordinate with PG&E. We have to get injection station installed, et cetera. That will take time. That will take development. That will take capital to install. So we're just starting out. And so all the questions that Mayor Delgado is asking, the questions you guys have right now are really key to set the project going forward. As Felipe mentioned, the scope of the previous GHG joint feasibility study was, it was a study that included M1W and included ReGen. And we looked at overarching mutual partnerships we could come up with that could benefit both entities. And the study really showed that very large investments were needed from each entity in order to make some partnership like that work. And it was pretty much ruled infeasible to move forward with some of the options that were there just because the capital was so expensive. And the two organizations just didn't have that available. So what's kind of played out is that each entity, ReGen and M1W, have determined that we're going to work together where alignments can exist with each agency's strategy. So we're seeing this as, you know, building the 21 kV line, any opportunities where we have to send them more power, we may, if it aligns with our overall strategy. So that's was pretty much the gist and the takeaway from the previous study. So the scope of this GHG study was to kind of peel out the ReGen portion of the study. As you recall, it was a joint study between two agencies. This is just pulling out ReGen's portion of it and saying, okay, let's look at ReGen and see what we can do with the gas that we have. And the options that we are considering in the report are 100% of the gas, the landfill gas, going to electricity production. This has a couple of limiting factors in it. One being the pole line that we send export power on, PG&E, has limitations. It has a maximum power output capability. Right now on paper, it says 5 megawatts. That is the max that we can export. If we make, and the second limiting factor is any over the fence agreements that we can make with M1W, with any other neighbors. There's Dole, there's an airport, there's, potentially Cal-Am next door. Those project would be a limiting factor. If we don't have the project, we don't have a customer to be able to send the power to. So even though we may have the gas to produce 10 megawatts of power, we may be limited in that we only have customers for 7 or 8. So those are some limitations.
Is that with electricity or limitations with something else?
Limitations with electricity, yeah, so like the 100% electricity option. It has those some on it.
Okay, so if we were able to put 5 megawatts going through the PG&E lines outward, then is additive what Cal-Am needs, what M1 water needs, you add 1, 2, and 3 to get total? of-
Exactly, so, M1W needs 2, Cal-Am needs 1, and we need 1, so that we could get up to potentially 9 megawatts.
Got it.
And we may not be able to get up to, we may be able to produce 10 based on the gas that we have, but the customer demand may limit us to 9. So finding those customers and finding those options are important in this option. That was one option that's being considered in the plan or in the study. The other option, second option, 100% of the landfill gas to renewable natural gas. And just to step back for a minute and talk about what renewable natural gas is. As the gas comes out of the landfill, it's 50% methane and 50% other gases. In order to inject into the pipeline, it needs to be upward of 90+% methane. So you need to increase the quality of the gas to inject it into the pipeline. That takes a lot of infrastructure, a lot of chemistry where you pull in the gas, it pulls out the stuff you don't want and kind of refines it into being pipeline quality. So that would require new infrastructure, new facilities that would have to be installed here at ReGen. The second option was installing that infrastructure funded by ReGen. So what would it cost ReGen to install that kind of infrastructure? How long would it take? And what are the risks associated with it? Going into a new market has different risks, has different things to consider. And so that's what that line item says. The third option, you had a question?
Yeah, so, who would we be selling that to?
It would be an offtake, some off-taker, and I'm using a general term because it could be PG&E, it could be a company, like a company that wants to offset some of their greenhouse gas emissions, like just throwing out a random name,
Right.
like Google, they want to increase their energy portfolio from renewable sources. So they may do a deal, I think they've done one with some other RNG producers. It could be another company that is interested in that kind of agreement. So there are different companies that would purchase it. The way the system works is even though you're injecting it into the PG&E gas system here, somebody in Colorado could be buying.
Yeah, okay.
So the way the market works, it's like, it doesn't have to be direct line connection to the other entity.
So there's a lot of options.
There are options out there, yeah, there are people who are interested in buying RNG,
Okay.
renewable natural gas.
And under that scenario, we would not be making electricity for us.
That under that scenario, because it's 100%
Right.
gas to renewable natural gas, that's correct,
Okay.
from our landfill gas.
Right.
This is where we're getting into like a lot of bottom.
Okay.
We could buy that gas, we could buy gas back and produce power here, which kind of makes it a little more complicated. So we might
Okay.
inject the gas into the pipeline,
Yes,
but then have another straw that pulls potentially that same gas out and produces power here.
And I got a discount price after it's developed.
Right.
So
Or like, yeah, so that's an option, but right now, we're just considering we're not generating our own power.
okay,
We're gonna be buying PG&E power, if this scenario is chosen.
okay,
And that is included in the decision-making spreadsheet of, well, if all of our gas is going to RNG, we have this revenue, but one of our costs ends up being buying power from the grid.
I think I know what an RNG developer is, but is that someone we have a contract with to take our gas and purify it? And sell it to find other customers?
Yeah, so there's a third option here, which is partnership with an RNG developer, and that's where we would put out an RFP saying, we have X amount of gas coming out of our landfill every day. And ask our developers to bid on that. On producing a project where they would fund the infrastructure and install it. We would work out a deal where might be a revenue sharing deal where we get a certain percentage of all the revenue that they make from it, or a royalty, et cetera. They would take the risk of and the capital expense of building it. And we would kind of feel hands off on it. We wouldn't operate it, we wouldn't own the equipment. But we would send our gas, and we'd have an obligation to send them gas. And that gas that we send them has to have a certain quality to it, or there are penalties, et cetera. So this third option, I think of like getting married, you know, you now are committed to your end of the bargain, and you're in it together for a long period of time until the developer makes back their investment. And the term of the agreement comes to an end. This could be 20, 30-year agreements that we're talking about, where the gas would be locked up going to this RNG developer. The key thing to understand about this is, you know, making a deal with another entity that locks us in, and we can't make other decisions with the gas. The gas is committed, and those are that kind of limits the amount of, if we make electricity, if we want to do something new technology that comes around for gas, we wouldn't be able to, because we'd be locked in to this developer. The economics here are really driving, because if we go to the second option, obviously it has a lot of risk, but the rewards, the revenue potential of that option is the highest. Because we take the risk, we get the highest revenue. The third one, we may not make as much money, but we don't take as much risk in the whole deal. But it's still possible that it's competing or better than electricity production. And that's what this study is looking at.
Our fueling station was built with this mythology.
Yeah. So similar, Jay's pointing out that we have a fueling station here that fuels the garbage trucks and fuels some of our facilities. So we committed that we would buy a certain amount of gas every year. And then that developer came in, built and owns that equipment. And now we're committed to buying that much gas from them every month, right? So until they make their money back for the infrastructure installation, and then the prices change, so you get a better price, the pricing model will change based on that. But it's partnership for sure.
so the infrastructure is here, but it's just who funds it,
Yes, the infrastructure is here, we don't own it,
right?
if we don't operate it, but we get the benefits of having it here. But we're committed to
using
to
it for that.
using it, buying it,
Right.
or in this case, committing our gas to that use. These are the three options we started talking about with GHD, and they have spreadsheets galore, putting all these pieces together. And we're in the midst of, reviewing their first draft of the report and their calculations and making sure that we're including all the relevant factors, but it is still a very high level look at both the markets, at what is possible for ReGen. We do have to, once we see which way we want to go, there is going to be more market analysis we're going to need to do to develop the project, develop the RFP, decide what individual little pieces we want to keep or not. And one thing that's coming to our minds now is the consideration of a hybrid approach, where we reserve some amount of gas for power production. And we only commit a portion of the gas to going to, I put CNG, I meant RNG. But going to RNG. And this may be a balance that we want to investigate. As you mentioned, like, where would we get our power if we were to send 100% of our gas? There's a resiliency in part in doing that, or we wouldn't be able to produce our own power, so PG&E goes off. If for some reason electricity prices go way sky high, or natural gas prices go sky high, we'd be at the mercy of the market and at the mercy of getting that grid energy. If we reserve some energy or gas for ourselves, then we are able to do things with that gas. We can produce our own power. We have a free, it's free, but we do get gas from the landfill constantly, so we can produce power. We can entertain excess power that we make. We can sell to the grid. We can sell to over the fence customers. These things are now possible at a much smaller scale, but possible nonetheless to make sure we have some resiliency in the facility. Going with the hybrid approach, we will not make as much revenue as we would if it were to be 100% RNG. But that's the trade-off with that. So goes to what we value as far as going forward. But one key element is how much of each. There's a whole spectrum of these RNG projects are only feasible if you have about 2,000 SCFM. So if you go any standard cubic feet per minute, so that rate of gas production, they're only feasible at a minimum rate, right? You don't build a facility unless you have enough gas to pay it back. So we wouldn't be able to go any lower than that on the commitment to the RNG project. And so we're producing at this moment about 2,500 standard cubic feet per minute. And there's about 500 SCFM excess where we have to reserve if we want to go with the smallest RNG plant.
How much should we do there, you said?
2,500 SCFM.
So all but 500 of that would have to be dedicated.
Correct. Something about the hybrid approach, yeah. That would be likely the smallest project that would be of interest to these
The 2,000.
RNG, yeah, the 2,000.
That would be 500 for other
uses, yeah. Again, RNG may be so valuable that we're leaving money on the table, but we do reserve some of the resiliency.
I think we just gotta acknowledge is that we continue to put materials into the landfill, so we're gonna see an escalation of that landfill gas goes up, so the current margin that we start off at 2,000 and possibly 500 will grow over time, so we have to make those considerations as well, so. The power and the RNG, or just isolated to one, that we're gonna see greater than 2,500, that will escalate. By 2045 is estimated to be 3,600 SCFM. So there's a need for growth in what we develop now. We can't say there's a minimum threshold, build a house right above it, and then we grow right past it, because we're expecting to grow. So this is what all those elements we're looking at through those studies is, what are the course deviations as we start to implement the build, so it can have the resiliency to last us a long time, or fit in the bandwidth of the projected growth that we're gonna see in the landfill gas.
And another element is that we only need the most power, that peak power need here is between 6 a.m. and 4 p.m. All other hours, we wouldn't need, be producing power. We could, when the team comes in the morning, they can, start the generator over at the landfill gas, get the power going to power the MRF. Then at the end of the day, we could shut down the power. And so that would kind of limit the amount of gas that we would use. So that would be attractive to know for a developer that we don't need that gas 24/7. It would just be when we're operating. And this hybrid approach is where we think ReGen's best play here is. But how much power of each power or RNG would we want to reserve? We have over the fence opportunities, but reserving gas for those over the fence opportunities then limits how much could go to RNG. And also, we're looking at a crystal ball, trying to figure out, can we get those other customers that are over the fence to take off the power?
And evaluating the market is, we're seeing these now compete against each other, over the fence to Monterey One Water, over the fence to the pipeline. So we're gonna see all these competitions and really looking at, for the board, it's really recognizing, is the financial piece the biggest piece? Or is some of these other elements reserving power rights, or landfill gas rights? So that 50 years from now, if we needed to power our own facility, we could. So we're trying to insert all these elements, and we right away recognize there's issues with these three scenarios because they're absolute. The other one is the balance of the pole. If we only can generate 5 megawatts, but we have gas for 10 or 11, it puts us in a bind. So now we have to look at where are those parameters lining up for us, and that's really looking at the hybrid approach, so we can maximize the landfill gas usage. We will not be able to utilize all of that gas for power if we're limited to 5 megawatts over the fence, because that will not allow us to produce anymore to get over the fence. But on our on-site usage, if we were planning to build anything else, we could increase it because the on-site usage is more. So that is the only advantage when we look at that. This hybrid approach, David quickly recognized we're gonna have to look at this balance of what the need is gonna be for the organization over a long period of time. It is really good consideration for us to do.
Does the microgrid come into this at all? Or microgrid is a whole separate?
Microgrid is just how the power distribution is set up. Anytime if we have the demand, then that matches our generation, you can create a microgrid, because you don't need to send power off site.
So once we had customers, then we can start talking about microgrid.
Right.
If we don't have local customers, we only have PG&E somewhere out there.
Right, so every time you're producing excess power, like right now, we're using one on site and exporting, could be exporting 4. So we have 2, that 4 has to go somewhere. And therefore, we need to be able to be connected to the grid to send out that 4. If we had customers over the fence that are nearby, that we're sending all of it, we could island and we could just produce and generate here on the site. That's a simplification, you do have spikes and valleys for the power use demand over time, and so you need something to regulate it. But, yeah, that could be possible if the demand met the supply. We could make a microgrid.
So a microgrid, can it help with storage or it's just a pass through?
A microgrid, storage could be an element in the microgrid.
Okay.
But where we are here, I'm deciding what our approach just generally is. Microgrid is pretty far down the line of decision making.
Thank you.
And storage could be an option in the hybrid, option as well. There is, dollars associated to storage capacity, so we generate during the day, we fuel the fuel cell. And at nighttime, they open it back up and they're distributing it at nighttime when you don't have the competition against the solar, the wind that's being generated, today. So those are some other nuances that we're aware of is we compete against solar and wind, and there's so much of it now during the day that runtime in the evening is now an option for us. So in the hybrid scenario, you're not just looking at one constant run, you're looking at a run during the day versus a run during the evening when we shut down our operation. So there's quite a bit of elements to this, but we're trying to get every one of them exposed and meet the need for what the next study will entail when we start developing the financial aspects of the market and the demand.
And even in Felipe's scenario, there's a decision, do you run engines to store electricity? Or would we let that gas bypass and just go to an RNG station? Not produce the power when it's not in demand, and let that gas go to the RNG, produce natural, to produce the gas. It's the amount of options here at this point are a little overwhelming. And so dialing it down, getting all the information and kind of crossing these off and understanding our values here is really gonna be the key point to give us guidance on what we pursue.
And that's what I was gonna say, and Felipe, you kind of touched on this, what are our values? I feel like we need to have some sort of guidance when we look at this. Are we looking to just maximize dollars? Are we looking for, greatest flexibility? I would hate to make a decision now that locks this board up, 20 years from now, and they can't make any other decisions. Like, do we know what the market is for RNG? Like, are we comfortable knowing that market's gonna be there? I mean, I know you're asking all those just
Absolutely the right
questions, but I feel like we sort of need to have some guidance when we're looking at this, because there are so many different outcomes.
Sound exactly like me with, Felipe and I talked, that's exactly the question there. We can seek the money, or we can seek resiliency, we can seek like autonomy and decision-making power in the future.
Yeah.
Exactly the right questions to be asking, and one of the reasons why, instead of waiting for this report to come out, be finalized and delivered with the bow on it, is we're bringing it to the finance committee to say, these are the considerations we want to start getting you guys thinking about. So when the report comes out, you have the nitty-gritty detail, you can evaluate, because the money is, in some cases, is pretty large, and money can solve a lot of problems too. So if you're leaving that money on the table, it may be worth it to take that opportunity, because you can buy generators, you can solve the problem in a different way with the revenues that you generate. But it's absolutely the right.
What's the timeline? So this is a draft study. What's the timeline for that study being completed enough to where we could start really asking?
So is that on the chart you already showed?
It's not on there. So the study is in draft form right now. We were thinking of having it ready for the November board meeting.
Not October.
Not October,
Okay.
and for the November, December board meeting, we're kind of talking about it, and it really depends on how much we learn from the initial reports from the study, and then want to dive in more and get more information to put into the study. And so we've gone through, submitted some comments already on it. And we think that it's gonna be ready in November, December, but we also would like feedback from
Yeah.
from you all. From what you're hearing now, are there more things that you want to include in the study?
So I'm just curious, so GHD's approach is just financial. Like, they just wanna know, like, what is
They're
the
doing like a
financial
market
of-
evaluation,
Okay.
they're looking at how much it would cost to buy power, even in the money aspect, they are
Okay.
looking at the market. What is the outlook on the market,
Yeah,
what's happening out there,
okay.
what could become available to us if we were to make a
That's
choice,
good, okay.
over the fence. Partnerships that may be available, they're looking at those as well, what values we've already, we could get from the over the fence partners,
Yeah.
what values we could get from PG&E, or not from PG&E, from our, two phases or three CE,
Yeah.
these people who are buying the power.
Yeah.
But the values element is staff.
Mhm.
We're gonna be bringing the strategy and what we think the value to us, and feedback from, and the board, on what we want to pursue.
Will this committee get the draft in October, the month before it goes to the board, and do we have access to the first utilization study online or hard copy?
The first feasibility study is available. I think we presented a synopsis, a summary of it. We can present that, provide that.
I mean, it's the first utilization study that GHT said.
Yeah, that's the joint feasibility study between M1W and ReGen.
So is that online available?
That is online. It was presented as part of a board report maybe a year and a half ago.
Yeah, good, so. And then this one would come to this committee.
This is in draft form, and I defer to Felipe on when the right time is to let you guys see the draft, or do you want to wait till final?
But is the plan to come to this committee first with the draft before you go to the board in December?
Yes. Yes, the whole goal of this is starting to layer in some substance to the direction that we're investigating and being curious about, so keeping you informed along it's a lengthy process, so I would hate to come one day and say, this is the path we wanna go, and it's the first time you heard of any of these options being presented, so we wanna layer this in here at the finance committee. As we get progressed, we will present it to the full board. If you guys want a copy of this draft, we'd be happy to distribute directly to you two now in its draft form. I would just say, don't share that information outward. But just for our internal use as investigating and being curious about the data that's presented in it, that I think is a good course. We are making some recommendations on the data. We poked holes in it and said, is it really gonna cost us this much if we stayed here? Is there these other options that we can incur by it? You know, is there a hybrid approach that they could recommend as a fourth option? So we've already are seeking some responses from them on more attributes to it. And then we may say, yeah, this is what we needed, has the attributes we want, and then seeking the deeper dive around the financials, how long, what are the nuances, what are the descriptions, what are those other elements that we want, that we're capturing, resiliency, running power for our own place, whenever we wanted to in the future, even if we decide not to at the inception, but that we always have an option to generate our own power off our landfill gas. When we look at landfill gas, you gotta look at it as a gas tank or a fuel tank. That doesn't cost us anything when we draw from it, other than the operation supporting the needs for the environmental protection and all those other elements that are being monitored for compliance purposes.
Which we have to do anyway.
We have to do it anyway, so knowing that we have that fuel tank full and available to us without having to charge every time we dial up more volume is in our best interest, and thus right away we recognize some of these elements were needed in the study. But I think those attributes, we can start putting them into the study and into the right direction, so when we go deeper into the deep dive, it is around all those elements that we've identified are we're gonna be curious about, and we go. If over the fence to Monterey, One Water is the winner on where it goes to. They could take our power for a certain amount of time, but when they get to a point where they are producing their own power, we'll have another injunction in the pathway that will create it. So looking at it now is very important. Looking at all the elements, you can't exclude any. And then you have to weigh out, you know, the purpose and the intent of them.
Is this study, are they doing, is one of their considerations hybrid, or are they only looking at those three scenarios?
They're looking at those three scenarios only right now. The hybrid is really, really dependent on our values.
Mhm.
Because that slider can move depending on how many people we would want to send power to. What do we think is the potential for customers to manifest around us? And so that's where it's really difficult, is like reading knowing where that slider is gonna be.
Mhm.
We're working with GHD and trying to stay within the scope of the study, which, I've asked them for parameters. You know, fill in the box, fill in the blank kind of thing, where, okay, if we go with this, if we move the slider, can we kind of calculate it ourselves and play with the numbers ourselves? We're talking with them, seeing how easy that is to incorporate, and we're in the midst of having those discussions. Haven't heard back from them on that
Mhm.
yet. We did say we could make this available. It is obviously a draft. There's numbers in there that are that need to be vetted and confirmed. So, I wanna take you guys down too much of a path before we lock down maybe the next draft. I think would be really valuable.
So it's proprietary and take it with a grain of salt.
Yes, it's setting the stage of the options, right? It's not absolute. The numbers are, we dove into them. We see some elements that need to be corrected, so I wouldn't stick to any hard number there until the final comes out. And then you can do a comparison and then bring it up at that point. But I think for now, it's create that curiosity of, is there other elements that you haven't heard here through your 15 years of service that you would say, we're missing this, or, you know, your 5 years of service, that we're missing this, right? But really, this is to activate thinking around the potentials, highest and best uses of our gas and the outcomes of it, right? It doesn't always have to be driven by the finances. It's a big piece, don't get me wrong. But those other elements of who we want to be and those attributes, I've taken down the resiliency piece, the future power, having those capacities to take back, will be elements that we definitely include as we continue the discussion. But this is really the beginning of summarizing some of the approaches that we're gonna be taking in the future to identify what is the best option for us, what is the best fit for us. Thank you, David.
Sure, we've kind of talked about this, I'll just fly through this, steps going forward, get feedback from finance committee. We're doing here, finish existing study and determine the next phase of evaluation. This one is a recommendation from the study. I don't think there's really no reason for us to not do this. We could publish an RFI, a request for information. Just send out, you know, what if we have this much gas? Who are the developers who would be interested in the project? What would terms be? What technology are they using? What is the gas quality that they would need? So getting a better understanding from the developers of what's available and what they might, how they might structure deals.
How is that different than an RFQ?
Request for qualifications is, maybe you can help me out here. It's more of, being, for professional services.
So
Like,
this is an analog to it. This is
right,
for
yeah,
industrial information.
yeah, we're not committing to doing anything. It's just asking for brochures, asking for a pitch.
So it's like an RFQ in a different industry.
I see this as us finding out who our customers might be and how much they might be willing to pay and under what terms. Whereas an RFQ or an RFP is usually us procuring services, right? That's how I think about it.
Making a commitment.
Okay, so, but this is
Although
sending
sending
an
a
RFQ
developer,
to developers.
Yeah,
So we're not looking for customers, we're looking for developers
we're looking for information from developers, like
about customers.
well, yes. So the developer may say, we need, 5 acres. We want a minimum of 2,500 SCFM. Your gas quality needs to be, 60% or higher. All of those would disqualify them from being a partner with us, so, that would guide, and say all the developers said that. That would guide us here in the study to be able to, okay, well, we're 2,000 is too small. We would have to go to 2,500 in order to make it feasible or viable for someone else. And then also, our deals, our offtake agreements are this kind of revenue model. That may be something that they would share. So it's just getting information from them to help guide us in putting together an RFP. Where we would ask specifically, we want this project.
Right, yeah, like what's their depreciation timeline, right? Is it a 10-year deal? Is it a 25-year deal? What do they see as opportunities for selling the market?
And it wouldn't be a commitment to select that either. Just getting their brochure information.
Okay. When you were to send out RFI, would you list some questions you'd like them to consider answering?
Absolutely, yeah,
So-
there'd be a,
Okay, so one of them that I would like to ask them is, and you guys too, but them, is with what's going on at the federal level being uncertain, but sort of anti-renewables, you know, how does, you know, what are the uncertainties in the future that they see that matter to this project as a result of, you know, at the federal level, the recent events?
yeah, absolutely, and that's one of the risks. Some of these RNG projects rely, depending on the customer, they rely on credits. They rely on a value for the renewable piece of the gas in addition to the. So it's definitely something to keep into consideration. We've asked GHD to do some of that as well. This study does include some of that, but getting it directly from the developers is also gonna be telling. But yeah.
I think it'd be helpful for us to see the list of questions that you're ready to send to an RFI. And then maybe us, and maybe the board can add some more questions. Because your questions will trigger us to be thinking along the right lines. Then we might have some other questions that we come up with, we think are important to ask the RFI.
Short term, we need to make the short term decisions on power sales. As I mentioned before, projects going forward are going to take some time, you know, the decision is gonna take some time. And so we have power generation right now, we have current agreements. So those are gonna come across our plate here really soon, a short-term decision on power. Instead of a long-term decision on power, kind of get us through until we make a decision and know which way we're going.
And when you talk about making decisions, is it how much money do we wanna put into making power to facilitate those?
So that's
Those
part of it,
agreements?
that's, I think that's
Okay.
the next bullet, but that's the power customer, right now we're with 3 phases. We may, have discussions with other power purchasers
Okay.
to, but we would only limit it to a year agreement or a short-term agreement rather than they may want a 20-year agreement, 10-year agreement. And so in this time where we're discussing this study and which way we want to go, we don't want to lock ourselves into a longer term agreement, so we would talk about short-term decisions. And then your point, investment strategy and existing power plant. If we know we're gonna shift to another technology, we would change our investment strategy in the current power plant. We may do rebuilds instead of new purchases. We may try to keep things going and not rebuild the whole thing. That's gonna be more capital intensive. And also evaluate future utility power agreements and over the fence opportunity for power sales. This is stuff that's ongoing, and you've heard Felipe talk about it, you know, M1W, the other customers that may come up. Getting the information from the market and knowing what revenue we can get from those customers is valuable to this study. So that's it. All right.
Where are we at with our infrastructure for producing electricity in terms of, like, our power sales have been declining, we haven't been doing very well with that. Are we at a place now where we can, are we gonna be able, like, do we have to put in a lot of money at this point? to
No.
Bring it to a place?
So we don't have power generation going on right now, and we have a faulty in what we believe is the transformer, so we've been trying, we put in an application, David's made several attempts with PG&E. We need them to shut off the power at the transformer, so the transformer can be evaluated to see if it's going bad. We believe that's what's causing the faulty, so we need to get that evaluated, so I would say at least for the next month, we're not gonna have power generation. We may go, once we get the rendering, we'll know how much more time we will go. We don't anticipate it being, through the end of the new year, but we would hope that we can get our power generation up online. We haven't done, we had some capital investments for new cogen engines to go into play. But we're holding off on those expenditures, looking at the development of what is it we're going to be in the future before we start investing significant contributions into the infrastructure. Our contributions should come when we identify that vessel to go through. To David's point, our short-term agreement with 3 phases is set to expire at the end of the year. We're gonna evaluate other options, and we want an option that will give us the time to think about this 1 to 3 year strategy and, get it into a building and design phase. So the agreement may be a 1-year agreement with some extensions and maybe up to 3 years with a way out for us. But we're looking for our partner to come with more resources and more potentials of what it could be than our existing partner. Our existing partner has been very silent on position of a more favorable agreement, items that would support our pathway to a longer vessel.
Who's our current partner?
It's 3 phases. And so that's why we're exploring that opportunity. Where else could we get the support that we need to? David and I have 8 months of getting new information, new emphasis around what's going on in the cogen plant. So again, this is wide spread out. It took a lot of influence to figure out where we're at today. We have a good idea, so we're gonna continue to play away on it. I don't think generation will be back up to normal until November or December.
Okay. Yeah, so I guess my question is, with this, like, are we in a race with our current infrastructure before that completely fails and we have to dump money into it? Or can we like inch along and be okay? Like, how much time, when do
We
we
can
make
inch along.
these decisions?
We can inch along. We definitely
Okay.
can inch along.
Okay,
We got 4 engines.
okay,
3 of them that were running full capacity to get over the fence to get the smallest return, so it cost us a lot to generate. We know that we probably need 1 engine to run our facility. That's the only thing that's viable right now on the table, so we could run the other engines and receive dollars for it, but is it favorable for us? And so we've looked at the runtime for cost, so in certain months, yes, it is favorable. In certain months, it's probably not favorable for us for run. What we really gotta look at and isolate right now is, do we have the capacity to continue running power for here? And we would say, yes, we have the ability with the existing infrastructure to get us as far as long as we need to, until we can do the reinvestment on the equipment.
including the M1 hookup once that's done next year.
If the purchasing power agreement is the item that's,
Right.
because it's competing
Right,
against these absolutes, right? And so what we do recognize with M1 water is that it would be a fixed rate. Meaning we wouldn't have to play the day ahead market, it won't have no ups and downs, it is just a fixed number that we can apply to it. But is it gonna pay for our infrastructure? And is it gonna be for a long enough term for all of that to be worth it for us to distribute? If it was 5-year, I'm saying not long enough. The good thing is, I've talked to Shudo, and so he's willing to go for a term that would cover the cost. I think our concern is, could we compete with the market rate? So if Shudo's paying 39 cents a kilowatt, we would need to be better than that. And does the model support 39 cents or 37 cents just below the market. If it doesn't, why would we do it? So we're now seeing these items come very, very clear for us. We see some people outside that qualify for a mild, biomat, which we don't qualify for, getting $1.06 a kilowatt. So you can see how fast the model will get turned on its head if you're getting these external credits that apply for renewable energy. So that's where we're at. I think, again, I would say hats off to recently, they're throwing a lot of resources for us to navigate and understand how that market is playing out, and they're looking at options for us.
So they might be a new partner to replace three phases.
Yes, yes. Yeah, but we're crossing our fingers that they would want to take on our portfolio for, the next year, maybe two. Again, if we can see the fast track to get there, we would want to take it. If we need more time, then we have it, and we can continue to generate power, knowing that maybe we're not gonna get the over the fence sales, but we can power our facility. It's a little over $100,000 a month for power here, so we know there is value there. So
Yeah.
just analyzing it, these are great questions. This is why we wanted to bring it here, so that we can really start activating the curiosity around what those options could entail for us in the future. So this is exactly what we expected. Great questions, feedback. And if you get any more as we move forward, then send them to David and I, and we'll analyze them and include them in the projection forward.
Okay, so the next time we'll have this discussion will be in November,
Maybe,
maybe.
if we're ready,
Okay,
if we're ready,
okay,
right? If we're ready.
Okay,
It's all contingent. Did we
Okay.
get the results we want to present in front of the board? If it's still really loose and we still haven't looked at all the hybrid options, I would say, no, let's not bring it back until we do have it narrowed down to a menu that we have implied some of the resiliency, the finances, on all those aspects we're able to check the box there. I think we would be prepared to bring it if we're able to do that.
Bruce.
Probably a couple of very quick questions. Can we get a copy of this?
For this, yeah, absolutely.
And even a hard copy would be nice too. And then second one, early on, Felipe was saying that we have to look to the future and understand that as our landfill area grows, it will generate more power. And my question is, does the older garbage start to generate less power?
Yes.
But the biology changes, so the organics have broken down, so it produces a different kind of gas. So as the older garbage matures, it stops producing as much methane and it starts producing other gas. So the gas quality goes down. So we already see this in the very old parts of the landfill, where the gas quality is really bad. It's only at 30% methane or 20% methane. And so you have 125 wells out there right now, and some of them are poor quality, and other ones have like 55% methane that are balancing that out. And so, yes, it does change the gas quality. The gas quality will change first, and then it'll start to drop off in how much gas it produces. But the time frame for 1 ton of garbage that goes in there, it'll be producing gas for 50 years after it's put into the landfill.
And at your X, it might get on more of the dirty side than the clean side. I mean, it's always declining in quality, but at some point, it's not helping the average.
Well, actually, it's going, so the newer garbage will, as it starts going anaerobic, it'll start producing more, so that probably takes the gas activation 2 or 3 years, it'll start to creep up. And after 10 years, it's starting to produce really good gas, like very high methane quality, kind of levels out. And then in year 25 or so, then the quality starts to go down. There's a graph I can show you, and it shows which gases go up and which gases go down over like a longer.
Now, so a ton of garbage will help the average cleanliness until about year 25 or 30, and then it starts to bring down the average cleanliness of everything you've got.
Right, and meanwhile, theoretically, you're still putting.
So they're crossing, they're
gas.
crossing trajectories.
You're still putting gas in, or not gas, you're still putting trash into the landfill. The older stuff the old stuff now is stopped producing gas. And so it's kind of bouncing around. And it really depends on the landfill, how it's gonna produce, yeah.
I mean, at some point, it seems like after we've implemented 1383, will we see a slight difference? I mean, without putting all those organics in?
We should, and then that's all behavior related, if we can get the community to divert the material, or we divert the material here, and yes, we will see a reduction in gas volumes. However, we wouldn't expect to see that for 20 years, the impact of those changes, and it's gonna happen gradually over time. And likely gradually enough that we can make the adjustment.
So you mean that it's gonna happen gradually enough that if we locked into a 30-year contract,
It wouldn't impact that, it would likely wouldn't have time to impact that significantly and throw its way off.
I think when we gotta be worried about that drop off is when we stop putting trash into the landfill, is we have an end date of new culturing gases that will be occurring, so that's the point you'll see it. I'm thinking still even past closure, that we would still better have these offtakes of gas, whether it's in power or in RNG, it would still continue post closure.
right? So successful diversion of organics, were it to happen. The expectation is it's gonna happen so far in the future. And then there'll be a lag time, we'll still be able to have the old stuff that was put in there. So that a
Exactly.
30-year contract would not be an issue in a 30-year
Exactly,
contract.
that's exactly it. And we modeled the gas production with the idea of SB 1383 being implemented. So there's a model of gas production for landfills where you put in the parameters. One of which is the organics content and the how much it'll produce. And that's what we're basing the gas production model, the gas quality models, to guide this study. And yeah, it just happens over such a long time that.
I don't wanna take away from the strong efforts of 1383, but when you look at all the piles that are to the right of the entrance of Charlie Benson, which is the compost yard, that's all organics, that's all stuff that was destined for the landfill. So we've enacted 1383 since 2022, there's food waste being diverted out there, so we're already starting to see that happen in front of us, so all those organic are no longer in the landfill, they're being external. I think what we're looking at is how much more of that organics could we pull out of the stream, and that's really gonna be influenced by the participation. That's our challenge with everything else, right? All the other streams as well is how much time do I have in my personal time to focus on these elements that may get us to a smaller point or not, and that's really still to be seen as we still see more volumes come into the organics. We would like to see that grow, that would show influence that it's working. If it's not growing, it's showing that there needs to be something else in legislation that curbs the behavioral use, and that could be more monitoring systems that, you know, are looking at the trash stream getting dumped, and Kim has to have a cart of fruit in there, you know, why is that in that cart? So we may see the tip now go from not only monitoring your organics can for trash and monitoring your recycle can for trash, but looking in your trash stream to see if there's items in there that should go into the other carts, and associating some sort of monetary penalty to invoke more position of more material out of the landfill.
That's not relevant to today's discussion.
It is, because all that organics is sitting out there and it's not in the landfill, so in theory, we're already transitioning organics out of the landfill, and I think that's my point.
That's why it's not relevant to our needs, because it's too small and it takes too long to make a
Agreed.
difference. It's good for other reasons.
Yes.
But it's not.
Yes,
And it's incorporated in the study, so the modeling takes this into account on an assumed adoption of SB 1383, so it is included.
And even if there was, say, new legislation that mandated, us as processors, say, to get all organics out of the landfill, that was destined for the landfill, it would still be a timeline for the existing landfill commodities to wane. So there's just so many factors at play, so it'd be great if we had more adoption, right? And we're still hoping for that, but
Yeah.
it's a long trajectory overall.
And it doesn't affect what we're talking.
Yeah.
Correct. Well, thank you. That's-
Great, thank you. Anything else, Bruce? Thank you, this is super interesting. You guys, we have lots of big decisions to make. Oh my gosh, but I'm really happy that we've begun the conversation here, so. Right, general manager communications,
I don't have any today, thank you.
all right, super. Any future agenda items?
I had something written down, I think it was. Oh, I don't know if it's an agenda item, but we need to know what our policy on absences is. You know, this committee's lacking a member of the board.
All right. Thank you. I'll go ahead and adjourn. Thanks, everyone.